Isabelle couldn't take it anymore. How many times did she have to smile at him? How many times did she have to strike up a conversation? How many times had she lingered in the hall, looking back at him as the elevator doors closed? More than a month had passed, but she bore no fruit from her efforts to woo this new stranger in her apartment building. It was always the same routine. He'd be waiting in the lobby. She'd come in after him. They'd get on together. They exchanged a few casual words, and she'd get off at her floor, wondering about what-ifs. Isabelle admired the soft-spoken way in which he greeted her. His tall, gaunt figure mesmerized her. She couldn't help but blush when he'd look into her eyes, but she clearly perceived an entrenched reluctance on his part. Her advances landed flat. Maybe he had a significant other, or was married, she speculated. But she quickly dismissed these theories, because he wore no ring on his hand, and she never saw him with anyone else. Perhaps a dose of self-conceit played into her musings. Isabelle was, admittedly, a strikingly beautiful girl. Her figure impressed many onlookers of the opposite sex, wherever she went, and this fact was not lost on her. To encounter a man who seemed to spurn her kindled a sort of frustration she'd never experienced. One balmy April night, Isabelle stepped onto the elevator, having decided to go out with some friends in town. Standing alone in the elevator was none other than the tall, gaunt man, dressed impeccably as usual. He stared straight ahead after nodding in the slightest way to her. Suddenly, Isabelle swung her body to face him head-on. "Excuse me, sir, but if you please, I'd like to know why it is that you refuse to ask me out," she demanded. At this, the man calmly said, "If you please, ma'am, I propose to take you on a walk at this very moment. Tonight the moon shines bright, and it's not so cold. You may better understand then." Isabelle's tongue twisted in her mouth. This was a remarkable turn of events, and all she had to do was speak her mind. "I suppose I could accommodate your invitation if it won't be too long," she said. "Then let us be off," the man replied, motioning with one hand at the open elevator doors and gently grabbing her arm with the other. The night was bathed in silver luminescence, and all was still. Isabelle and the man traversed a small path that wound its way through apple and pear orchards behind the apartments. During this walk, neither spoke a word to the other. The man merely looked ahead, and Isabelle followed his lead. Half of her felt enchanted to have finally earned his company, but she wondered who this man really was and where they were going. At last, they reached a clearing punctuated by a large hill. The moon was rising just above this hill, casting long shadows on the lawn where they stood. The man stopped and bent his head down. Isabelle looked on, breathless. "It's been 30 years since that night," he said, almost whispering. Isabelle couldn't move. "It wasn't right what they did to me. I didn't hurt nobody. Only tried to help a young lady in the elevator who dropped her purse. But they accused me of..." Here his voice trailed off. A gust of wind hit Isabelle's face, and she shielded her eyes from it. Then, looking up, she screamed in abject terror. At the top of the hill was the forlorn silhouette of a man's body hanging from a gallows. Isabelle looked around her for aid, but she realized the man beside her a moment earlier was gone. The next instant, she collapsed on the lawn. Nobody would believe her story later, not even her closest friends and family. When she asked the apartment receptionist about the man, she received a confused look. Not only did no one believe her, but no one would tell her that they saw her seemingly talking to herself in the elevator lobby every day for the last month. Isabelle knows what she saw. She just couldn't explain why he chose her. And so concludes the tale of a rare time in history when a woman fell in love with a ghost.